Today on Locked On Red Wings, we answer your viewer-submitted questions.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, guys, it's a mailbag. Happy Friday. Dead period for the Red Wings, dead period for the NHL. Although Tarasenko did sign with Ottawa, like just now. I don't know if you saw that as we record this on Thursday evening. That pretty much just came across my wire.
Shut up, VT, baby.
But dead period. So we figured we'd throw it out to you guys to see what you guys wanted to ask us, and we'd do our best to answer.
We haven't done one in a while either.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
Well, we had a pretty, for as far as off seasons go, the Wings specifically had a pretty busy, June and July with, draft speculation and profiles, and free agency was obviously huge. And then the trade and whatever, like this is really, I know we're moving to 3 a week now, but this is really the first opportunity we've had to like kind of calm down and just like kind of have an open discussion about whatever. So
yeah, absolutely. So why don't we get right into it? We have 6 questions. I submitted the mailbag episode on Thursday morning, and we're recording on Thursday evening. So we got a handful of questions.
Not much time. Still got 6 out of it, baby.
First one comes from Twitter. It is ace_fishing1. If we're buyers at the trade deadline, who do we go after and why? Let's say everyone is healthy at that point. What positions of need would be filled based on your projected line from a few episodes ago? Who gets scratched to make room for the new players? Now that is it's a very well thought out question, and there's a lot of layers to that. Scott, I don't know if you want to take the first crack at this one, but what kind of, I guess it's easiest to phrase this as, what's the biggest need to be buyers at the trade deadline, and what players get scratched?
Yeah. What it really just, in my brain, that's kind of just like what are still the biggest needs after the offseason, right? Like that. And I know that being a buyer at the deadline is not necessarily like 1-in-1 with like, oh, we need to fill all of our needs directly. Like some of it's just getting, the talent that's available. But I would say that it's still probably like, if you want to break it down into like each like facet of the game, like each area, I mean, you could do, what am I thinking of? Positional group. Golly. I was like, there's definitely a word for that I'm just not thinking of. I would imagine that the forwards we would acquire would be more like goal scoring. Like, yes, they got the top end goal scorer that we wanted, right? Like that, and that's great. But I like that's one guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like if he whatever struggles, like knock on wood, gets hurt, heaven forbid, like you're talking about a situation where you're just right back where you were. So I feel like goal scoring is still a priority for this team. You're not going to have a whole roster of 40 goal scorer guys, obviously, but like depth scoring is still very much something that this team could always address. And so that's definitely one thing I kind of look at. I think if the Red Wings, if we get to the deadline and we're like, we are absolutely buyers, in my opinion, the one thing that we are going to be talking about in like February, when that time of year, we start that conversation, I think it's going to be because we need another goaltender. And that's not that I don't like the moves that we made as far as goaltender goes, right? Like we certainly tried to shore up the depth in that position over the summer. But I think that you could get to a point where it's like, man, if everybody not named Husso, who's had an opportunity in net, is still putting up 890s or 895s, then you might just have to be like, look, let's just count our losses. We tried again, and let's see who the best available rental goalies are to just like kind of be a 1B or even a 1A for the remainder of the season. Because they really shored up the defense. The depth has improved a lot in the forward core. So that those are kind of the biggest two that still jump out to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what my answer was going to be, is more goal scoring and more goaltending. I think Husso could bounce back. I think James Reimer is going to bounce back from, his down season because historically he's been above 900
Yeah.
every single year of his career except for this last year. But I could definitely see a reality where this team's pushing for the playoffs and they need to really shore up their goaltending and trade for a rental. Scoring as well. You always can add more scoring at the deadline. I mean, that's what mostly every team tries to do at the deadline. But like you said, Scotty, depth-wise, they got that covered. They've really addressed their depth needs with solid depth the last 2 years. So I think that as far as depth goes, they're pretty solid off already. There's not much else to say. I think that
currently,
I guess
right? I mean,
healthy.
that's the thing. Like health determines all. Like at the end of the day, if we get to the deadline and half of the top six and another, couple of depth forwards are all hurt, then like this is a much different conversation. But also like, would we be good enough to be buyers if that was the case as well? So like, I think if they're buying, those are the two things they're addressing.
Yeah. And the other half of this question too is like, who gets scratched? I mean, guys get pushed out of the lineup. It's a trickle down thing. So you probably get guys, except for like penalty kill specialists, who might have a role, but
Sure.
You might see
I think Veleno's a really early candidate too. To be
Veleno,
honest.
it's tough because he's so young. So you think maybe he can carve out his own niche, but guys like Klim Kostin, maybe not Kostin. I don't know. We have to see him first, but Christian Fischer, guys like that might be the early candidates to get, the healthy scratch. Maybe even a Robbie Fabry if he's in and out of the lineup all season long with health issues. But that's again, very dependent. So I guess I hope that answers your question, Ace Fishing, as best as we could. The second question here comes from Emmett Ferguson on Twitter as well. Would you consider a season for Lucas Raymond successful if he gets 60 to 70 points this year? Or when do you think Senators fans will stop obsessing about us? That one is its own thing we'll address. First, let's talk about the Lucas Raymond thing. 60 to 70 points from Lucas Raymond in his third season would be absolutely fantastic. He had 57 in his rookie year. A dip down to 45 points this past year. 60 points to 70 points would be a clear step in the right direction for his development. I mean, if it's 60 points and it's like a 30-30 split, I would not be happier. Like that would be a fantastic step forward for Lucas Raymond as a player.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. Year one was 23 and 34. Year two was 17 and 28 for 45. I mean, if he put up a career high in points, and even if it's not 30-30, I mean, if he puts up a career high in points and eclipses 25 on the goal side of things, and that's how it's divvied out, that's a career high in both, right? Like that would be a career high in goals and assists, and then obviously points. I think that would be, I think that would be a great step because this is his age 21 season.
Yeah, he's so young.
Like he turned 21 in the middle of he turned 21 in March. So he's going to be 21 for a majority of this season. If this dude's age 21 year is a 25-35 season or a 25-30 season, I think that's a pretty big victory.
He's
for sure.
So incredibly young.
And the goals, admittedly, like the way that's divided, to your point, is very important in that. If it's 60 and it's I don't know, 15 and 45 or something, that I guess maybe we're having a little bit different of a conversation. That's obviously great, still getting a lot of assists and whatnot. But like, I think that I do think that the goal scoring and how many goals he scores is of the utmost importance.
Absolutely. About the Senators fans thing, are you okay?
Did you hear that?
I heard. I thought you just hit desk or something.
No, dude. I think there's an animal in the walls.
Huh.
Just made a very loud noise.
On the couch there.
No, it's definitely a squirrel and it'll leave shortly. We got to talk to somebody about it. It's not a big deal. Anyway, keep going.
Scott, he has squirrels in his walls. The Ottawa Senators thing, that is just a bunch of noise to me. I don't pay it any heed.
It's whatever.
There's people from their fan base, and Twitter is just, whenever I see Senators fans or Leafs fans talking smack, I ignore it, man. They're not going to leave us alone because we're at the same stage of the rebuild and they're competing against each other. It's going to be like that constantly. I'm not going to feed into Ottawa Senators Red Wings drama because there's no point. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I nothing you or I can say right here is going to change like the dynamic. between these two teams. I don't know. Like I pretty much exclusively use social media at this point just to talk about the Wings and Tigers exclusively. So like I'm not gonna like, dip my hand into that, but like obviously you see it everywhere. And yeah, like you said, like it's not only just the fan base. I think that's what got everybody riled up. Like it's the national media. Like everyone and their mother compares these two teams and has for 3 years now. And so it's just, going to come with the territory, unfortunately. If they get good at the same time, it's going to make for a fun rivalry, though.
Yeah, so don't expect it to die down anytime soon, but also you don't have to feed into it. If you see somebody in your replies that's a Sens fan and they're talking smack, you don't got to reply back, and it just ends there. That's my philosophy.
Well, I mean, there's we have experienced quite a bit of that for sure.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue answering your viewer-submitted questions on this mailbag edition of Locked On Red Wings. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Athletic Greens. They're a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. Drink AG1 because that full foundational nutrition supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support your whole body. It replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. It's a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source superfoods. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category, and it helps you build your health foundation first. If a comprehensive solution is what you need for your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs. And you get that with your first purchase. I always forget because the URL has changed. And it's engraved in me. The old one has muscle memory. It is now drinkag1.com/NHL network. Again, that is drinkag1.com/NHL network. So check it out. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are talking. We're answering your questions. Again, there's that muscle memory again. Scotty and I are talking about X. No, we're answering your questions today in a mailbag episode.
We're talking about your questions.
We're talking about and answering your questions. This next question comes from Cameron Nagel. If one of the young D-man, Wallander, Johansson, Edvinsson, make a really strong case to be on the Wings out of training camp and preseason, do you think Steve would bump someone like Sherratt to 7th D-man?
Repeat the names again. I'm sorry.
Wallander, Johansson, Edvinsson, if they make a push to make the roster, do you think Steve would bump someone like Sherratt to be the 7th D-man?
Sure. So I think the only possibility here is Edvinsson. I don't think there's any way that that the other names you mentioned, Wallander and I can't remember the names you listed for the life of me. Was it Johansson?
Wallander, Johansson, and Edvinsson. Come on, man.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, between those three, I don't see any realm of possibility that Johansson or Wallander are like so good in camp that they're like, you know what? Not only are you going to make the NHL on opening night, you're also going to like boot, Ben Sherratt, who has 3 years left of his deal. Again, on opening night. That's not to say that throughout the season something can't happen and injuries are bound to happen as well. So it's nice to know that that's a possibility at some point. Edvinsson's really the only one I could see maybe making a push for opening night to do that. And even then, I think that Yzerman brought in like addressed defense in free agency to create a situation in where it would have to be blatantly obvious for like that switch to be made. And I'm not sure, even if Edvinsson has the best camp ever, I'm not sure that having the best like camp or little bit of preseason ever is like, I don't know, worthy of like that decision being made. I guess worthy is not really the word I'm thinking of, but I'm not sure that that's enough evidence, I guess is my point, for everybody involved in the decision making to like pull trigger on that idea. But Edvinsson's the one that if it were to happen, it would be.
See, I actually kind of disagree with you a little bit here, Scotty. I think that if any one of these guys proves that they are better than any individual defenseman on the Red Wings roster, outside of like a 7th D-man, like if you're better than Gustav Lindstrom, good for you, but we're not going to have Wallander play 7th D-man.
Right.
But if they outplay and outperform somebody in training camp than a regular roster player, then I think Steve Yzerman, and he's done this and he said it before, like he's going to give it to the most deserving player. So as far as the first half of that question goes, like if Wallander, Johansson, or Edvinson are really good in camp and they look like they've earned a spot on the roster, I think that there will be a spot on the roster made for them. As far as the Sherratt part, I think that whoever is the worst, the worst defenseman performance-wise in training camp is the one who's going to bust it down to seventh D-man. Now, if that is Sherratt, that's him. But Yzerman's at a point where he's trying to make this team a competitor. So he's not going to pass on an opportunity to make the team better just because some guy's making $4 million and another guy's a rookie. Like, that's where I'm at. I think that if any one of these guys, like Yzerman's built a roster that's supposed to compete with one another in training camp. He's not handing young guys roster spots. But if they earn their roster spot, like Soderblom did last season, they're going to get the chance. They're going to get looks. So, I mean, yeah, could Sherratt be the seventh D-man? Yes, if he is the worst defenseman at training camp.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the sentiment that like he has built this system to compete with each other. I certainly don't, but I mean there's I don't know. I clearly I can't find a good way to articulate it, but like I really have a hard time believing that the decision makers are going to look at training camp and be like, oh well, this person has looked so good in training camp that the guy that we signed to a 4-year deal and is 1 year in is going to get the boot on opening night in year 2.
Well, the question does also include preseason as well. Like, let's not.
For sure, absolutely. But even I mean, like we talked about preseason a lot last year, and like every year each of the last 2 years, I guess, there does seem to be like one person that we didn't expect to do well and then did really well in preseason and then made the roster. Soderblom's was a little bit, like there was a forward injury that kind of opened a spot along with him being really, really good in the preseason. But so yeah, like I'm not saying it's impossible. I have a really hard time believing that that's just like overwhelming evidence for the decision makers here to just be like, oh yeah, just like kick, like Sherratt off to the side immediately. I think it's more likely that they'll be like, okay, we'll keep an eye on that. And then if by, American Thanksgiving, if any of those guys are crushing it down in GR and Sherratt is a traffic cone, then they're like, all right, well, we'll still have 3/4 of a year of this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
But like I said, I agree with your sentiments and your logic behind your point, though. So,
okay, let's move on to the next one. This one comes from Shay B30 on Twitter. Given the vast amount of turnover on the roster from the end of last season to the beginning of this season, is it fair? Beginning of next season, is it fair to be concerned about chemistry heading into a vitally important season as far as the rebuild is concerned? That's a good question, man. These are such good questions. I mean, chemistry is always going to be something that you have to find early on in a season. But as we were just discussing with the last question, there's training camp and there's preseason, and the goal of those is to figure it out and get guys up to speed on the system that you're running. And I know there was a lot of turnover this last season, but there's less turnover this offseason than there was like last offseason. Like, and I mean that as in like Derek Lalonde's here for a year too. Like the guys who are here last year, basically everybody was new because you had a new head coach coming in. So everybody had to learn the same system all at the same time. This year you have holdovers. You have guys who know the system already. So yeah, you're going to have new guys who are going to have to build chemistry, but it's going to be easier because you already have guys who know the system. It's not new to everybody who can help get them up to speed in training camp and preseason. There might be some figuring it out early on. But I mean, that is what preseason and training camp is for. So I'm not too concerned about chemistry, hurting their chances. If anything, like maybe a week or two into the season, they'll have it figured out.
Yeah, I'm pretty lockstep with you. I think that is much more of I don't even want to call it a concern, but I think that this conversation is much more applicable to last season than it is to this season for pretty much all the reasons you just laid out. They did have a huge influx of like moves, right? They signed 10 free agents and made a trade. Like it's not like this is just like 100% the same group and whatnot. But when you're looking at the top 6 and the top pair and the starting goalie, like there's not a ton of turnover in those areas, right? We're assuming the top pair defensively is going to be the same. We're assuming Husso is going to get in that opening night. And in the top six, like you add DeBrincat and whatnot. But besides that, there's not a whole lot of shuffling up at the very, very top. So I think that I agree, basically. I don't need to drag it out too long, but like I do think that it's something that the depth players will have to figure out, but I don't think that outside of DeBrincat, anybody that was added is going to have to be like so vital to the system that it's going to be some huge learning curve. Like it's just going to be watch the guys that are playing 20 minutes. They know how to execute the system at this point and kind of follow suit.
Absolutely. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish up this mailbag episode of Locked On Red Wings, so stay tuned. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast, mailbag episode. I got 2 more questions to get to. This one's a quick one. This one comes from Decoy on Twitter. Little discussion on Elmer. Is he destined for Grand Rapids next season? To put it briefly, no, I don't think he's destined for Grand Rapids. I go back to the conversation that we had on Wallander, Johansson, Edvinsson just a few minutes ago. Like, I think he, just like those guys, has the opportunity to make the roster out of camp if he earns his spot. And yeah, he was helped out a little bit last year by timing of injuries, but he stuck around for 21 games. Like, he nearly burned through his rookie season. He's going to be rookie eligible again, but he almost played enough games to not count as a prospect anymore. So I think that I don't think he's destined for Grand Rapids. I think it's likely he ends up there. If you were to ask me today, I think he has like a 75% chance of starting the season in Grand Rapids. But I don't think it's a guarantee because, last year we were like, oh, dude, like, where are we going to put him? There's not, like, we were talking about how good he was and how we wanted him to be on the NHL roster opening night. We didn't know where he would fit. And then an injury happened and he just fit. But I mean, he could do the very same thing again this offseason, this training camp, this preseason, and work his way back. So, I mean, the door's there. The door's there for any of these prospects. They just have to outperform somebody who has a roster spot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think more so with this conversation than with the defensive group, right? Like, this is very much a situation where it's no problem for the powers that are at hand here, right? Lalone and Yzerman to make a decision like, oh, Soderblom crushed it. It's very easy for them to then look and just be like, okay, well then, I don't know, no Joe Veleno, or like, oh, we want Joe Veleno for the setter, no, like, Fisher, right? That's $1 million deal, like, for 1 year. Like, well, that's great. You know what I mean? Like those ones, as far as depth forwards go, are a lot more, a lot easier to just be like, oh, well, like, this is clearly the better guy. There's not as much politics, I guess, is my point with it. So, yeah, I would still think that on July 27th, like, I would say that it's over 50% chance that he is going to start in GR. But to Brian's point, like, anybody, if they ball out enough in camp and in preseason, this roster is built to compete with itself, and so it's there for the taking. Very much more, again, like, in my opinion, at least, with the forward group than it is really any other position.
Absolutely. Now our final question comes from Instagram. This one is from Jesse Wareham.
Are you really excited that we got a question on Instagram? That
was
all
our questions come
that
from
was
Twitter.
Really passionate.
Instagram. In 5 years' time, how much of the current roster do y'all expect to still be here?
Yeah.
And where do y'all expect the team to be as a whole? Y'all,
baby.
You know what? You can't. You love to use y'all.
I do, man. I love it. I always get heat for saying y'all.
Do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, so it's really just like what percent of the roster is going to be here when we're hoisting the cup, or like
who do we expect to be here in 5 years' time?
Oh, 5 years? Okay, sure. Yeah.
And where do they expect, I guess, the team to be as a whole? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So well, I mean, the at this point we are at a trajectory where 5 years from now this team better be like a deep, consistent, like, playoff push team. Like, I'm not going to say like a guaranteed cup. Like, people just throw that around. It's very difficult to win one team out of 32 now wins it every year. That's a very difficult thing to just like have as your goal every single season. But I legitimately do think that, 5 years from now, you're still going to be in the prime of, well, the back end of the prime, but still like in prime years of Larkin, who's, like your captain and that you've built this thing around. DeBrincat got what, a 4-year deal. So that would be on, if he were to stick around, that would be on the second contract of his tenure here, if he were to still be here. But yeah, I mean, I would say that, man, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of like a percentage. Turnover happens a lot at the bottom of rosters, man. Like people don't appreciate how much turnover really happens at the bottom. I would say it's probably less than 50%, but I don't think that's like I'm not trying to say that with a negative connotation. Like that's just like how like Sherratt's going to be gone in 5 years. Mata's going to be like, look at the defense specifically. Like who outside of Sider, who on this defensive unit in 2023 is guaranteed to be here in 5 years? No one. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, and that's dramatic, but like it's true. And so there's still like a lot of turnover that's going to happen. But and then you also have Yzerman, who's a non-long-term contract giver on top of that, right? So like, I mean, it's very feasible that, I don't know, like, is it, again, like no negative connotation, but is it crazy to say like 20%? Think of 5 years ago. Like, I know it's a different situation. Like, we were entering a rebuild then, so it was way different. But, like,
I mean, current roster, if I'm going to name names, I mean, obviously Larkin, JT Comfer will be on the 5th year of year 5.
right.
So, like, those are the obvious guys. DeBrincat, I would hope. So, I would think
imagine,
DeBrincat's still
right.
here.
If everything goes right, then
yeah,
he will
Lucas Raymond would still be here.
Yeah.
Moritz Seider would still be here. Biggest brain fart I've ever had, forgetting our star defenseman's name. But like outside of that, Michael Rasmussen, like even he could hit the free agent market if he doesn't if you never know.
Going up, man. Some middling team is going to be like, we'll give that dude middle 6 money, and I'm not sure the Wings are ever going to do that.
Like, I think Jonathan Berggren will be here, but like outside of those guys, I don't know with confidence I can say anybody on this current roster, like not counting our prospects like Edvinsson.
Right, of course.
And I mean, I think that says a lot about where this roster could still do, but like good rosters turn over and they still compete, right? Like the core has to remain the same.
In salary cap hockey, in the salary cap era of hockey, you take a core of 5-ish, you can bump that number up if 5 to 10 maybe at most. You take a core and then you're constantly churning out like good people to fill in around them, and it's ever moving and ever evolving. Like it's not, it's not the Ken Holland pre-salary cap era where the roster is going to be the exact same for 8 years, and we're just going to pay everybody everything to stick around. You know what I mean? Like that's just not how competitive hockey teams work anymore. Look at any of them. Like look at really any team that's had sustained success over the last decade. Like, I mean, go look at a 5-year difference between some of those guys. I mean, there's definitely some exceptions that I can think of already off the top of my head, but like for the most part, I would imagine that it's single digit players, like pretty consistently, that are the same from like a team that was good in 2012 to a team that was still good in 2017 or whatnot.
Yeah. And I mean, like, guys I can say with confidence: Larkin, DeBrincat, JT Comfer, Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, Jonathan Berggren. But outside of that, there's like, I can't say with confidence anyone else could still be here. I think there are guys who would likely still be here. But if you're asking me 5 years from now, who will be on the roster still, it's basically those guys. As far as where the team should be, I agree with you. Deep playoff run team, hopefully hoisting Lord Stanley's Cup, but deep playoff run team for sure. Because I mean, in 5 years' time, we're barely making the playoffs, then this rebuild has gone awry, to be sure.
Yeah, this is all also under the assumption that we are still trending upwards and like going to be a sustained playoff team. If this thing collapses and is a major disappointment, then this is a completely different conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Scotty, that does it for the questions. That does it for the episode as well, I believe. Well, I guess we'll be back with an episode on Monday, but before we go, Scotty, this has been weighing on me. I do have a confession to make.
Okay.
So earlier in the week, I posted that graphic, right, that showed our top 10 prospects as we had done that episode, and nobody noticed. And I didn't want to bring it up, but I almost just want to get it off my chest. Nobody noticed I misspelled a word on the graphic.
You misspelled a word. What did you misspell?
So I made sure to get all the names right because they were European names. And I didn't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, of course.
But I did not proofread the header.
Oh, no.
And so it says Brian and Scotty's top 10 Red Wings prop packs because I forgot the S.
And no one said anything?
Nobody has said anything. I posted it on Facebook. I posted it on Twitter. I posted it on Instagram. Nobody has commented on it.
I don't even believe you. I feel like this is that. What's that law where like?
Mandela effect.
Yeah, the Mandela effect, dude. That's what I feel like right now.
Go check right now on our Twitter profile.
I will. Locked On Red Wings. Wow, they follow me. Honored.
You probably hit follow yourself. You have access to the account. Does it say edit profile?
Oh my goodness, it does. Yeah. It's the top Red Wings Pro Packs. That's unreal.
Nobody said anything. And like I didn't notice it until like an hour after, and I started catching traction, and I was like, I don't feel like taking this down now. And so I was like, I'm just gonna let it ride. And nobody said anything. I'm like, I cannot believe, because people on Twitter, they catch those things so quick. I'm just shocked that nobody caught that. I'm happy nobody caught that, but I'm shocked nobody caught that.
That's crazy. Clearly I didn't notice either.
Hey, good for me.
Good for you, man. Proud of you.
But of course, now I'm putting it out there in the universe, but it's been long enough now that it's
you're manning up to it, though.
Well, it's been long enough now that it's like, laugh about it. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts, my dude?
We ball.
Cool. We'll be back with a new episode on Monday. Same time, same place. Your team, 3 days a week.
Every day.